While everyone expected big names and instant stars, the Broncos may have quietly built something even more dangerous, a defensive foundation that could change this team's identity sooner than you think. And the most intriguing part? The players who receive the least attention now may end up being the ones who define the future of this franchise. But before revealing why this strategy could shock the entire league, be sure to click the like button if you truly believe the Denver Broncos are on track to become a competitive team again. And I want to see how confident you are. Leave a comment right now saying, "We'll be back stronger in 2026. Now let's get straight into it. The biggest talking point right now is Tyler Onedum, and from everything coming out of inside the organization, this is a player the Broncos fully expect to contribute early. In fact, there's a growing belief that he could have the most immediate impact among all defensive rookies. That's not speculation, that's directly aligned with what the coaching staff envisioned when they made the pick. What makes this even more interesting is how clearly defined his role already is. He's essentially stepping into the spot previously occupied in the defensive line rotation, and the expectation is not just to fill space, but to execute within a very specific system. The Broncos see him as a three-down defensive lineman, someone who can stay on the field in multiple situations, and that alone tells you how much trust they're placing in his skill set right away. When you turn on the tape, a few things jump out immediately: length, strength, and explosiveness off the first step. His arm length, over 34 inches, is something the Broncos covet heavily because it gives him a natural advantage against interior offensive linemen. That extra reach allows him to strike first, control engagements, and open up opportunities not just for himself, but for the entire pass rush unit. And here's where it gets even more exciting for fans who love defensive football. This isn't just about one player winning his matchup. The Broncos' defensive scheme relies heavily on movement, loops, stunts, and coordinated pressure packages. Onedum fits perfectly into that system. His ability to execute those movements and create disruption is exactly what allows other pass rushers to thrive. It's a domino effect, and he could be a key piece in that chain from day one. Now, let's be real, he's not a finished product yet. There are areas where he still needs development, and the Broncos are fully aware of that. But here's the difference with this team's current approach. They don't need him to be perfect immediately. This defensive line is built as a rotation. The goal is to keep players fresh, maintain intensity, and bring constant waves of pressure throughout the game. That means Onedum won't be thrown into the fire alone. He'll be part of a group that includes players rotating in and out, sharing snaps, and maintaining a high level of effort without drop-off. And from everything we're hearing, the Broncos believe he can handle that responsibility right away. There's also something else worth noting, and this is where fans might need to adjust expectations. Even if he doesn't come in and rack up big sack numbers immediately, that doesn't mean he's not making an impact. His role could be just as much about setting up plays for others, collapsing pockets, and disrupting timing. That kind of contribution doesn't always show up on the stat sheet, but it's critical to how this defense operates. And let's not ignore the bigger picture here. The Broncos didn't draft him just for depth, they drafted him with intention. This is part of a larger strategy to maintain a strong defensive front without relying solely on high draft picks or big-name signings. They're building through development, system fit, and coaching, and Onedum is a perfect example of that philosophy in action. There's already a projection forming internally that he could be one of the top 3 defensive ends in the rotation, alongside the established names on the roster. That's a bold expectation for a rookie, but it tells you everything about how confident this staff is in his ability to translate his college production into the NFL. And maybe the most exciting part? We're going to start seeing answers very soon. Training camp, preseason games, that's where the theory meets reality. That's where we find out if this vision truly comes to life on the field. And this is where things start to get even more intriguing, because while Tyler Onedum may be the name getting the early buzz for immediate impact, the Broncos quietly made another move that could pay off in a completely different way, and that's the addition of Miles Scott to the secondary. Now, at first glance, this is the kind of pick that many fans might overlook. It wasn't flashy, it didn't dominate headlines, and it came in a part of the draft where people are usually already thinking about the bigger names. But inside the building, there's a very clear understanding of what this move represents: long-term value with real upside. Miles Scott is not your typical safety prospect. He actually started as a wide receiver, and that transition alone tells you a lot about his athletic profile and his football intelligence. Making that switch is not easy. In fact, by his own experience, it was one of the toughest adjustments he's had to make. But he embraced it, stayed with it, and over time, developed into a completely different type of player on the defensive side of the ball. And here's where it gets interesting for the Broncos' future. Because of his background as a receiver, Scott brings natural ball skills that you simply can't teach. He understands route concepts, he knows how receivers think, and that gives him an edge when it comes to positioning and reacting in coverage. That instinct, knowing where the football is going, is something that consistently shows up when you watch him play. On top of that, his growth as a tackler has been significant. Over time, he became more reliable, more physical, and more confident playing near the line of scrimmage. We're talking about a player who recorded over 131 solo tackles during his development at the position, which is a strong indicator of both durability and involvement in the game. But let's be clear about the plan here, because this is crucial. The Broncos are not drafting Miles Scott expecting him to come in and start right away. In fact, everything points to the opposite. This is a developmental investment, a player who might spend his rookie season learning, adapting, and refining his skills behind the scenes. And honestly, that might be the smartest approach. Because when you look at the current safety room, there are multiple players whose contracts and futures create uncertainty over the next couple of years. That means the Broncos needed to start preparing now, not later. They needed someone who could grow into the role, not be forced into it too early. This is where the organization's philosophy really stands out. They are prioritizing patience. They are prioritizing development. And most importantly, they are building depth with intention. Instead of reaching for immediate starters, they're investing in players who can become starters down the line. And this isn't just talk, it's a consistent strategy. The Broncos brought back a large portion of their roster, which gives them the flexibility to let rookies develop without pressure. That means players like Miles Scott can spend time on the practice field, learn from veterans, and fully understand the system before being asked to contribute in meaningful games. In fact, there's a real possibility that some of these rookies might not even be active on game days early in the season, and that's by design, not by failure. The coaching staff wants to build them the right way, not rush them into situations they're not ready for. And if you've been following this team closely, you know this approach has worked before. Late-round picks and overlooked players have developed into key contributors because they were given time, structure, and the right coaching environment. Miles Scott could very well be the next name on that list. Now shifting over to the linebacker position, things get even more fascinating, because this is where the Broncos made a very deliberate decision that might have confused a lot of fans during the draft. They didn't prioritize linebacker early, and that wasn't an accident. Despite all the speculation and mock drafts suggesting they would target that position sooner, the Broncos stayed disciplined. They trusted their current group, particularly Alex Singleton and Justin Sternad, and didn't feel the need to force a move just to satisfy expectations. That mindset, best player available over positional desperation, is exactly what guided their decisions throughout the draft. Eventually, they added Red Murdoch, and this is another player who brings a very specific identity to the defense. He's physical, aggressive, and has a track record of making plays on the football, including an impressive number of forced fumbles during his college career. He plays with that old-school, downhill mentality, the kind of linebacker who attacks, who brings energy, and who can immediately